It's another rendition of PewterPirates.com's podcast, A Few Extra Bucs. I am merely Mike Nabors. We'd like to thank our title sponsors, House of Brews and Sea Dog Brewing Company. Great brews, great food, great service. You know, generally what we've been doing for the past few months is previewing the games the Bucs are going to be playing. But in my humble opinion, we'll get to Roy Cummings in just a second, and we'll get to Justin Thomas in just a second, our esteemed producer. This is kind of my theme when thinking about the playoff picture for the Bucs. Even though the Eagles lost, even though the Vikings lost, here's what my real theme for the Bucs is right now.
But it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I tell you, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
I'm sorry, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Justin Thomas, you pulled down a Meatballs classic by Bill Murray. How do you feel about the Bucs right now? They're just mired in this mediocrity, a broken record every week. I know they're still alive mathematically, but I don't think it matters.
No, absolutely not. The only thing left to play for is job spots and pride.
Roy, am I way off base here? How do you feel?
As you said, a classic Meatballs Bill Murray clip there. Well done. It doesn't matter. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. Look, this franchise is spinning its wheels. I don't even know how you feel if they win the last 3 games. They'd have to win them pretty handily and rather impressively in order, I think, for people to really change their opinions at this point. I'm pretty much an optimist. I usually find, the areas of the Buccaneers game where they're playing well and, where they've got room to grow. And I got to be honest, for one of the few times since I've started covering this franchise, I'm kind of at the point now where I'm kind of throwing my arms up and saying, what in the world? And, I hate to say that because we're basing all that on one bad half of football. And here's, okay, so here I go into my, glass half full mode. Maybe we're basing it too much on one bad half of football. It was a critically bad half of football. But, Mike, we both mentioned, I think, at halftime of that game, you and I, we were both kind of thinking, wow, how about this Bucs team all of a sudden? And, they just couldn't sustain it. But again, it seems like every time this team takes two steps forward, it takes 3 steps back. And I think that's where they are yet again. And so, look, they've got to go, in order to change this viewpoint, they've got to go on the road to Baltimore, win impressively there, follow it up, win impressively in Dallas, and then come home and show that you're a better team than the Atlanta Falcons, which I don't think, even on paper, a lot of people would think is the case. So, yeah, I suppose maybe they can turn the narrative around, but it just seems to me right now like this is a franchise that's spinning its wheels and it needs to find a new direction.
You know what, though? It's not just one bad half. They should have beaten the Redskins. They should have beaten the Giants. And if they would have taken care of business against those 2 teams, I don't care what happens against the Saints. When you look at what has happened in the NFC with the Vikings, with the defending world champion Philadelphia Eagles, with the rest of the supposed great NFC South, Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Falcons, the NFC South is a boatload of underachievers. And the Bucs had a chance, despite all the craziness in their season, for redemption. And we talk about the bad half of football against the Saints. That's what losers do, and that's what winners do. The Saints were winners and didn't play their best football, but found a way to win. And I'm hearing stuff in the locker room afterwards with the Bucs. Oh, they had more energy. Well, you know what? That's because you sound like a loser. Losers say that after games. So if I'm Dirk Koetter, I'd be impressed if he won his last 3. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Dirk Koetter should maybe adopt this motivational tactic moving forward.
Even if we win, even if we play so far over our heads that our noses bleed for a week to 10 days, even if God in heaven above comes down and points his hand at our side of the field, even if every man, woman, and child held hands together and prayed for us to win, it just wouldn't matter because all the really good-looking girls would still go out with the guys from Mohawk because they got all the money.
Amen, Bill Murray. You know what? All the good-looking girls are hanging out in New Orleans, in L.A., in Chicago, and Seattle, and probably at the end of the day, maybe Minnesota, because you know what? It doesn't matter, Roy. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
I hear you, and I can't disagree. It's a very frustrating time for a Buccaneers team that has horribly underachieved. And you know what? Maybe it all goes back to the beginning of the year without Jameis Winston and they were out of sorts. But, even then, you won the first 2 games. You were playing with house money at that point. Nobody expected that. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people expected that to happen. And you just couldn't keep it going. And it's just very disappointing. And, look, if the Glazers at this point decided we're going to blow it all up, fire everybody, we're going to trade Gerald McCoy and Levante David and even Jameis Winston and just start from scratch and, try to be like the Houston Astros or the Cubs in baseball and say, you know what, we're going to blow it all up, tear it down to the bare bones and start all over again. I couldn't blame them. I really couldn't, because I think they've been trying for years now to find that chemistry, that right fix, the right, group that's going to make this team representable again and relevant and respectable, and they just can't find it.
It's just unbelievable. This franchise hasn't won a playoff game in 16 years. You look at the New Orleans Saints last week. Sean Payton's been their head coach since 2006. You talk about blowing it up. Well, they blew it up. They blew it up with Raheem Morris. They blew it up with Greg Schiano. They blew it up again with Lovey. And now you wonder about Dirk Koetter. And before we get on to Dirk Koetter and the future, and we're going to play GM, all 3 of us in a second, Dirk Koetter had this to say about being mathematically alive in the playoffs and his message to his team right now.
I think you just play them. We talk about playing the best we can every week, and wherever it falls, it falls. So even though that's all true, that's not what we talked about today.
That just sounds like a guy resigned to the fact he's getting fired, Roy. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I'm not ready to break chairs right now and run out in the football field when I hear that.
Yeah, I think he's been resigned to that fact for a while. I think the 2-game winning streak buoyed him a little bit, gave him some spirit, but again, I think you can't help but look at it objectively, even if you're on the inside the way he is, and see a whole lot there that gives you a lot of hope. Again, it's an organization, a franchise that it can't seem to put it all together and do everything right. I mean, once again, last week, a kicker can't make 2 kicks, 2 critical kicks. Dirk mentioned it himself on Monday. Look, if we're up, 17 points at that stage, if we're up 20-3, yeah, there's nothing to keep the Saints from coming back on us. But at the end of the day, that's a 3-score lead. And, in order to get 3 scores, you got to work pretty hard. And, that doesn't suggest that we can't, get the ball in the end zone again or, put some more points on the board ourselves and make it harder for them. So those kicks were critical. Obviously, the block punt was critical. And it just kind of shows you. And look, I understand how momentum shifts happen in all sports. It really does. That can change in an instant, in a flash. And it did the other day with that block punt. But I've heard a lot of people wonder, why does one block punt like that, change your momentum so much? Well, look, when you're not that strong a team mentally to begin with, when winning is something that you go out basically hoping to do, not expecting to do, and as much as the Bucs may want to say otherwise, that's where they are. They're a team that goes out every week hoping that they can win, hoping that some kind of calamity doesn't derail them, as it did this past week, or 2 or 3 calamities derailed them. You go out hoping to win, hoping that, hey, if we do everything just right, we can win this game. That's what their attitude is. Not, hey, we can go out and even if we screw up half the stuff we're doing, we're still going to win because we're better than the other guys. They don't have that attitude. They really don't, because they know they're not. And whether it's the defense saying that about the offense, or the offense saying that about defense, or both of them saying about special teams, or them saying about how they're going to coach within the game, or what decisions they're going to make, that kind of thing. they know at some point something's going to go against them. And in order to win, they have to play perfect football. And who plays perfect football? It just doesn't happen. So, yeah, I think there's a psyche issue there, and clearly it starts at the top, and he's deflated. There's no doubt about it. He's got reason to be deflated. I think he knows that it's over for him. He's had his shot as a head coach. It didn't work out. And I think the only thing left for Dirk Koetter to decide is, what do I do next? Do I try to stick around and become a coordinator somewhere and quietly ride off into the sunset? Or do I just basically say, you know what? I made a few $1 million off this head coaching gig. I love it in the Northwest. It's cheap living up there. I'll go up there and live the rest of my life real quiet with my family.
You know what? It's interesting you say that, because I know he's from the Northwest, beautiful part of the country, Idaho. And every time I see him speak like that at a press conference, and I'm not blaming Dirk Koetter for everything this season. In fact, I like Dirk Koetter in a lot of ways, and you got to give him credit the way this offense has played, the numbers they've put up. He's done his job in a lot of ways. But when he talks like that, I've thought about that, Roy, that, you know what? He's made a lot of money in the league, and he's accomplished quite a bit in terms of maybe – I don't know if he ever thought he'd get a chance to be a head coach in the NFL and do the things that he's done. I almost feel like in the back of his mind, I'm playing with house money, and I have nobody telling me that. That's the sense I get. You know what? It didn't work out. I'll move on with my life type attitude.
Yeah, I could see if that's the case. Look, I think he had, there's a reason he got this job. Let's not forget that. The reason Dirk Koetter got this job as head coach was because he did a really good job as an offensive coordinator with the Buccaneers at a time when, a couple of teams showed some interest. The Buccaneers were afraid they might lose him, so they wanted to move before someone else took him away. He had a little bit of leverage there, so he took advantage of it. Good for him. I remember, I don't know if he ever, really wanted that much to be a head coach. I guess he did. It's something somebody offers you. You probably don't turn it down, but I think he would have been just as happy staying around as an offensive coordinator. But, the opportunity came. He took advantage of it, said, yeah, I'll give this thing a shot. I think I can do it. Get some good people around me, like Mike Smith, who'd been a head coach. Nate Katzer, who he's had before and has been a pretty good special teams coordinator for a few teams in the NFL. And it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? Well, at the end of the day, it's the players really that have to take the responsibility. I don't think it was a case of them not setting them up, because let's face it, the offense works. The defense works at times. It really is just, like you say, things like energy. That's, this team just gets derailed very easily. And sometimes, head coaches can't stop that kind of stuff.
Well, it's not Dirk Koetter's fault that a kicker on this Buccaneer football team cannot make a kick between 40 and 50 yards. It's unbelievable. It's really crazy. And it's not Dirk Koetter's fault that, Ryan Jensen is getting penalized for 100 yards this season, and it continued in the game against the New Orleans Saints. And here's what Dirk said about Ryan Jensen's continued penalty-ridden play.
When we brought Ryan here, we knew he was the type of player. I mean, we wanted to bring a type of player with Ryan's aggressiveness here. And Ryan, we talked to Ryan about playing close to the line, but not crossing over the line.
The reason I wanted to play that clip, Roy, Ryan Jensen, remember what a big deal that was? Remember how every Buccaneer fan signed off on that? We need a hard-nosed, tough guy in the middle. Last year, Joe Hawley wasn't the biggest guy in the world, or Ali Marpet. A lot of these guys, Ali Marpet wasn't a true center. We need to move him back. Ryan Jensen will be that guy. It just seems like Ryan Jensen, to me, personifies the Bucs this year. A lot of hype, a lot of expectations. Yeah, that was a good move. And once again, it didn't really work out.
Yeah, good point. Real good point. I think you're right. I think he does personify the Bucs, much like Deshaun Jackson personifies the Bucs over the last 2 years. A lot of hype, but everybody signed off on it, saying, "Oh yeah, this is what we got to do." Which, by the way, just about every time the Buccaneers sign a free agent, you hear the fans saying, "Oh yeah, good move. That's what we need. Let's go get more." Fans they just think, bringing in players like that just instantaneously makes you better. And, while it works on paper, it there's a lot more involved in it, but and they're finding that out. They'll probably never admit it, but it's why I kind of always chuckle when every time there's somebody out there on the free agent market, the Bucs want them to, Bucs fans want them to go pick them up right away. That's got to be our guy, because
you do that. And you know what? You definitely, that you've maintained that since I've known you, that, hey, let's just pause, take a deep breath, and see how this plays out.
Yeah, and the truth, because the truth of the matter is, you usually hit it about 50% on free agency as well. You can't really gauge what a player is going to do when he gets the money. The expectations become extremely high for players. Sometimes they're not put in the same position that they were prior to in the position that really made them, so attractive in the first place. You're asking them to do a little bit more because you're paying them more. You're putting them in a different spot, a different scheme. Sometimes guys just happen to have a good season, and you're trying to, capture lightning in a bottle for a second season in a row, and it doesn't work out. Free agency is a funny thing, and I'll say this: over the course of, I don't think Bucs fans really can complain too much about what their general managers over the course of the years have done in free agency. Go back to Mark Dominic, and they had the highest paid center then, and they brought in the highest paid tight end, and they brought in the highest paid receiver, and Vincent Jackson. I mean, they're always bringing in the highest paid this, that, or the other, and it seldom works out. It's not about the money you spend, really. Sometimes you're better off just, spending, going after Class B free agents and hoping that they, fit into a role that allows you to be better on a certain down, as opposed to, trying to get an every down player to play, really above his pay grade, perhaps. So it's really a tough thing. But, fans love free agency, and they want to see the teams make a splash. And if they don't, they think they're doomed. And funny thing about it is all the decent moves the Bucs have made in free agency, they haven't made a difference either.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Mark Dominic, and he was the former Bucs general manager. I want us all to play general manager, but first, Jason Light, basically in his 5th year, he's going to finish with about the same record Mark Dominic finished in his tenure with the Bucs. And is it fair that he gets more time, Roy? Do you see a difference in the Jason Light era compared to the Mark Dominic era?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't think Mark Dominic was a bad general manager. I thought he was a very good evaluator of talent. Mark Dominic was unfortunate to have Raheem Morris, who wasn't ready to be a head coach, as his first head coach, Greg Schiano as the second, who wasn't fit for the NFL as a head coach. Jason Light had, I think he had a better start with Lovie Smith, who in my opinion is a legitimate NFL head coach, but Lovie Smith didn't have any players. And when Lovie Smith had a little bit of power and basically made most of the calls in the first year in terms of free agency again, he brought in guys like Anthony Collins and, those types, guys who basically got their money and said, I'm good. And they never played hard. And then, and then he's got Dirk Koetter, who isn't really a head coach. So I think, if I'm a general manager, I'm probably, saying, look, you know what this team needs? It needs a Rich McKay type. It needs someone who understands the NFL and understands it, so well that he can help build the franchise. He can help, bring in the right head coach, bring in the right assistant coaches, things like that. I think the Bucs need someone over the whole thing, right below ownership, but above the general manager, who can call the shots here and set this team up for long-term success. Not take, a flyer on the next hot coordinator. They need a Tom Coughlin type, somebody who knows how to build an NFL championship caliber team. Not a lot of college guys can do it. There's not a lot of NFL guys that really know how to do it. They're hard to find, but I think that's what they need.
Basically somebody who's done it before.
Yeah.
All right, let's play Bucs general manager, because my whole theme, and it just doesn't matter, because it doesn't. The Bucs aren't going to make the playoffs. They're not going to have a winning record. It's another disappointment in Tampa Bay. Let's go around the horn here a little bit. I'll start with Justin. If you're the Bucs general manager, what's your number one priority this offseason to turn this Titanic around?
I think it starts at the top. So I would go with head coach. I mean, it's amazing how a coach can come in and change the whole attitude of a team. That happened with Sean McVay with the Rams. Most of that team was the same. So I think a head coach, a good head coach, especially like Roy said, someone who has experience. I know there's talk of John Harbaugh maybe leaving Baltimore, or now I've been hearing rumblings that Mike Tomlin might be out at Pittsburgh. So I think those are two coaches who've been to the Super Bowl, have won, who have built great teams, and I think those could be good candidates if available.
I heard a stat today, Roy, that Mike McCarthy's record the last 3 years is just a little bit better than Dirk Koetter's in Green Bay, and he has Aaron Rodgers. I need to check. I heard that on Sports Talk Radio. It's always a very, very reliable source. But to me, what's the key for you? I mean, there are going to be some decent candidates out there, but what's the biggest problem with this team they got to fix right now, or is there just one problem?
No, there's not just one problem. There's a lot of problems. I think you need someone to come in from the outside with a very objective opinion, who has no ties to any of the players here, doesn't have an axe to grind against any of them, doesn't have a love affair with any of them for any reason. Someone who has, as I said, I mean, I go a little bit higher than Justin. I go ahead of the head coach, and I got to go ahead of the GM. I'll say it again. I want a president of football operations, someone between the Glazers and the general manager who's overseeing the entire football operation. And I don't know if it's possible. I'm looking for Rich McKay. I'm looking, and if he's not available, then I'm looking for someone like him. As I said, like Tom Coughlin, someone who has done it, who's built a franchise, who knows who the head coaches are, knows how to build a team, and has the ability to do it and turn it around in a couple of years. That's what this team needs badly. It needs oversight from the very top. It needs someone who can tell the Glazers, you guys just sign the checks, I'll take care of the rest. A Bill Parcells type,
I was just thinking him, yep.
Yeah. I mean, Rich McKay, I don't know if he would come back. He's still heavily involved with the Falcons. I think he's pretty comfortable in Atlanta. My guess is he probably would come back if the opportunity were here. Tony Dungy is a guy who I think could do it. Someone who basically sets the tone for the franchise from the very top, who speaks for everyone and basically dictates, this is how we are going to win football games here. This is how we're going to act. This is how we're going to dress on the road. This is where we're going to travel. This is how we're going to set up our travel schedule. Someone who has success in doing that at the very top. That's where it starts. And I would leave it to that person to pick the new general manager and coach.
I just did the addition here. Dirk Koetter, 19 and 26 the last 3 years. Mike McCarthy, 21 and 22. Just for you Mike McCarthy lovers out there, because McCarthy had a pretty good quarterback up in Green Bay. I used to think you had to keep Dirk Koetter because of Jameis Winston. I think that's why he obviously got the job, for the comfort level there. But obviously that relationship has gone astray. And it's not just Koetter's fault. It's just there needs to be a new voice with Jameis too, because as much as I've criticized Jameis Winston on this podcast, Roy, we've talked about this, but they've invested way too much in Jameis Winston to give up on Jameis Winston. And he showed some signs. I like the way he's responded the last couple of weeks, even though he didn't have a good second half against the New Orleans Saints. So, yeah, you got to just clean house, bring in a new general manager, bring in a new head coach. My thing with Rich McKay is I was a big fan of Rich McKay when he was with the Bucs, and he had some great drafts. But what happened in Atlanta with him? I mean, to me, he didn't have the mojo up there.
Well, he took on a different role. Basically, when he first went there, a lot was being done by the owner, and then eventually, in fact, in pretty short order, Rich McKay became the spearhead of the effort to build a new stadium. So they took him out of the football realm, really. And a lot of that had to do with who the coaches were that were being brought in as well. I think he was glad to do it. He's an administrative type. But I can tell you right now, Rich McKay knows how to build a franchise. He knows what the basic objective is of NFL teams. He once told me, what he used to tell the Glazers when he was in charge of the Buccaneers, he said, and it was their choice. I mean, it was the Glazers' choice, and he made that point. He said, what do you want to be? He said, you want to be in the running every year, and be a team good enough to get to the playoffs every year? Or do you just want to win your Super Bowl and then, hope you win another one somewhere down the road? There's two ways to go. And they said, look, we want to be a team that's in the mix every year. And they said, okay, then we'll do that. And that line of thinking prevailed as long as Tony Dungy was the coach. When John Gruden got here, it was all about winning the Super Bowl. And once they won one, then it was about winning another one. It wasn't about building a franchise, for the next 10 or 12 years that was always going to be in the mix and get into the there's a goal among many teams in the NFL, and it's to get to the tournament. And by tournament, I mean the playoffs. And if you're an 8-8, 9-7 team every year, the breaks are going to break your way one year, and you're going to get there. And if the breaks really break your way, you're probably going to get to the Super Bowl, and you may win it. And that's the kind of team the Buccaneers had under Tony Dungy. And boy, doesn't everybody miss that now? When you were a competitor, when you were in there every year, teams like that are and you can see them out there. They're out. We know who they are. You look at them, it's the Seattle Seahawks, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's the New England Patriots. They're there every year. The Houston Texans have kind of become that kind of team. They're there every year. The Packers were, but they're kind of in a weak division. That's really what the Rams are doing right now. They're trying to become one of those teams that they're always in the mix. They don't always make it, but they're always in the mix, always a team that you kind of got to watch out for. The Giants were that way under Tom Coughlin. They're not that way now, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's not there. So that was the approach that they took under Dungy, and I think that's the approach they need to take again.
You know what's crazy is let's play the what-if game because we can do that on podcasts. John Gruden, to me, his fatal flaw is trying to do everything, trying to be head coach and general manager. We know he's a great head coach, but he's a horrible general manager. If he would have put his ego aside and he and McKay could have worked together, it would. How successful would the Bucs be, or where would they be today, you think?
I think they would have become one of the greatest franchises in the game, and I think it would have been sustainable. You see what John Gruden did here, and history's repeating itself again in Oakland.
Yeah,
McKenzie is gone.
It's crazy.
John Gruden is in charge. They've gotten rid of their two best players, and the franchise seems to be swirling down the drain. And it's exactly what happened here. John Gruden got here. He pushed Rich McKay aside. Rich McKay said, okay, if that's how it's going to be, okay, I'll move on. And eventually it wasn't just Rich McKay. It was John Lynch before he was done. It was Warren Sapp before he was done. It was Warwick Dunn before he was done. It was Mike Allstott, don't need you anymore. They never built a sustainable model. And that's what, unfortunately, and again, nobody wants to really admit this, but that's what Mark Dominic inherited. And he couldn't fix it. He tried his best, and Jason Light hasn't been able to fix it, and he's tried his best.
Yeah, the what-if game is a powerful one because I think that would have changed a lot of the whole Raheem Morris, Greg Schiano, Lovie Smith, Dirk Koetter, I don't know, just unbelievable catastrophes the Bucs have been a part of. Okay, so do you think moving forward now, we've talked about the coach and the GM obviously have to be out of here in Tampa Bay. What about personnel in terms of a position group? Is there one position on this team that's the most important in turning around right now? Roy.
Well, it's the trenches, both lines. You have to start drafting for the line for both. This is why I still don't have a problem with the Vita Vea pick. I hope he fits what the new coach because you've invested in him. But I think you got to start spending money in the line. I mean, and not just because we're coming off a game where Jameis Winston was under duress all day. Not just because we're coming off a game where the line couldn't open holes for the running game. Not just because we're coming off a game where the defense, got only one sack. I think you got to stop spending loads of money on free agents, even if they work out like Jason Pierre-Paul, because Jason Pierre-Paul's worked out great, but Unrein didn't work out, Bo Allen didn't work out, Vinny Curry's been spotty. A lot of money was wasted. You need to start drafting for the trenches because that's where you win in the NFL. You win in the trenches. You build from the line back. That's how it works, and especially on defense, and that's where they've got to go.
Isn't it amazing? Vinny Curry, Bo Allen, Ryan Jensen. I mean, all these guys were supposed to lead the big turnaround for this football team. It goes back to what you say, Roy. It's don't get too high or low with this free agency.
Well, one quick thing. I was once told by a general manager, free agency is where you go to fill the holes that you failed to fill through the draft.
Yeah.
And you can look at the Buccaneers and see that that's exactly what's happened. They failed to draft another guard after Marpet. Now more holes are opening up. They don't have a center. DeMar Dotson at right tackle, that's an area they've got to start drafting for. And obviously the defensive line, they've been trying to fill that with free agents for years, and it doesn't work. You've got to draft for that spot.
It's unbelievable. Justin, biggest personnel concern for you?
Well, I definitely agree. I think offensive line is a major issue. I wouldn't be too concerned with the defensive line. I mean, an extra player always helps. I would almost look at cornerback. I think that's another issue. I know they drafted 2 last year. They were kind of NJ Stewart's been banged up, but I'd like to see them get a star player in the first round. I mean, you just look at the Saints, and when they got Marshawn Lattimore, that totally changed their whole defense. And I think maybe one good player like that in the draft in the first round could do wonders to the defense as well.
You know what you're talking about, Justin? You're talking about a situation, and I agree. I would like to see a cornerback too, but they invested in cornerbacks this year heavily, drafting 3 of them, or not cornerbacks, but defensive backs.
Right.
You're losing pieces there, but you know what? This team's got to start being prepared for the day that Gerald McCoy hits the wall, which my guess is coming up soon. Same with JPP. Vinny Curry probably has hit the wall. I don't know if Bo Allen will be back. There's not a lot of pieces there. So, you know what I think is what we're getting to, guys? I think we're getting to the point where whoever comes in seriously has to think about what assets do I have that I can move to get first and early second round draft picks in order so that the Buccaneers, I think, in order to turn this thing around and start doing what they need to do, they need to have like 3 first-round picks and a couple of second-round picks. They need 5 players in the first 2 rounds in one of these next 2 drafts in order to turn this thing around and get this thing back on track, I think. I think that's what we're looking at. And I think no one should be surprised if it happens. Whoever comes in says, you know what? If whatever I can get for Gerald McCoy, whatever I can get for, believe it or not, maybe even God knows, maybe a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin or something like that. You start trading these pieces to get assets that you can then combine to move up higher in the draft. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these moves start to happen.
3 things from that comment. Roy, when Justin talked about Marshawn Lattimore, it really proves your point because everybody in New Orleans was howling at the moon, and I was one of the howlers saying, you need Malcolm Butler in here. The New England Patriots aren't happy with him. Bring in Malcolm Butler. And I thought it would have been a great move. It would have given them a corner who's a proven guy and in a position they desperately needed. But instead, Marshawn Lattimore falls to them because the draft was kind of crazy that year. And then they still could have traded for him, but they didn't. And they drafted Ryan Ramczyk, who everybody's like, what? They don't need more offense. They need defense. Well, all of a sudden, that may be, arguably the best draft class in the history of the NFL. Ryan Ramczyk's their right tackle for probably the next 10 years. Then they go on and, get Marcus Williams a safety and Alvin Kamara. And it's an excellent draft. But it proves your point on, you got to build in the draft, not in free agency. And speaking of, players that are maybe dispensable, Justin, you know what time it is. 3 and out. 3 questions and we're out of here. I said 3 things. The other thing I was going to say is we haven't talked about Jameis Winston much. We can discuss him and whether the Bucs get a veteran guy coming in here besides Ryan Fitzpatrick in future podcasts. But we have 3 questions, and I think you guys are going to like these. Question number 1, I think Mike Evans and I think Jason Pierre-Paul are indispensable players on this football team. Can you think of another, really, Roy Cummings?
I think O.J. Howard is, and I think Jameis Winston is. You've invested when you invest a first overall pick in a quarterback, and he falls maybe a little bit short of expectations through 4 years. You don't quit on him. They're too hard to find. I would put O.J. Howard, and I would put Jameis Winston in that category.
Justin.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll go with Roy since usually he answers my questions.
Well, I don't see any of those offensive linemen being indispensable. I look at Jason Pierre-Paul. I would trade Gerald McCoy. To me right now you trade Gerald McCoy because you can get something for him. I don't think he's indispensable. Certainly they don't have a kicker who's indispensable or a punter. I don't think Jameis Winston is indispensable. I think if you could get anything for him, you clean house. And I know I'm backtracking because I said you've invested in him, but I'd listen to offers if you get something good. But I agree with you. O.J. Howard would be my guy because as good as Cam Brate is, O.J. Howard is one of those guys that's just going to get better and better and could revolutionize that position. So I agree with you, Roy. O.J. Howard was the guy I was thinking about. But, man, I'd trade Gerald McCoy. And I'd listen to offers for Jameis Winston. How do you feel about those 2 things?
Well, I would listen to offers for McCoy. I would listen to offers for Winston, but I seriously doubt you're going to get a one overall for him.
Yeah,
and I'm not even sure you get a 1 for him. Because most teams will say, look, I can get that guy in the draft. And I don't have to spend. So I don't think you get a 1 overall. And again, having invested that 1 overall, and again, all Jameis Winston has done is maybe fallen just a little bit short of expectations here. He's done a lot of good things. He's had some bad moments. He's got some questionable character things still, but at the end of the day, you see what the kind of money that was put into Kirk Cousins, and what's he getting you? So. I invest in coaches who can make Jameis Winston better instead of trying to move him. 2 players like him are too hard to find.
What about Cam Brate? You think he could be a potential to try and?
Well, he's not at the same level as O.J. Howard.
Well, no, clearly not. But maybe if we're getting rid of some pieces.
Yeah, he's a guy I hate to say it, I would dangle him because I think you've got a solid backup in Anthony Auclair. I think Cam Brate is a guy who could bring a 2nd or 3rd round pick because he is that good of a tight end.
I'd say a guy who's not indispensable, but he's pretty damn good is Adam Humphries. You got to find room to keep him.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you got to keep some pieces or else you're not going to go anywhere. But and it's hard to move some of the talent pieces on offense, but. In order to make a splash, you might have to do something like that.
All right, question number 2. I looked at the free agents for 2019. I'm going to throw out 3 names. If you could have one of these 3 guys, and I was going to put old Teddy Bridgewater, but I didn't want to make Roy Cummings' blood pressure go through the roof. I'm going to put him out there. But here's 3 of them. Landon Collins, nice safety from the Giants. Tyrann Mathieu, another good safety from the Houston Texans, or Le'Veon Bell, possibly. Of those 3, you could say none of them, or is there one guy that stands out there from the free agents? Roy, you can go first.
Justin, you go first.
Okay, nice.
I appreciate that. I would love to see Le'Veon Bell in Tampa. I just feel like after he sat out, he's going to want his money, and I don't know if it's worth paying him as much as he's probably going to want, especially if the Bucs are going to retool their team. But of the 3, I would love to see Le'Veon in Tampa.
I'm not touching any of them. Here's why. Too much money for Le'Veon Bell, and I don't like the character anymore. Too much money for Tyrann Mathieu, and I like the character. I think he's turned his life around, turned his game around. But I don't need the safety. And it's same reason why I don't want Landon Collins. I think safety is an area where the Buccaneers are growing and growing well. I really like Justin Evans a lot. There were times this year when he was playing when I thought he might be the best player on defense for the Buccaneers. And I really like, and I mean, I wrote about it this week in my rapid reaction to the game on Sunday. I think Jordan Whitehead is an old school safety who's figuring out how to play old school football at that position in the new wave NFL. I kind of like what they're doing at safety. So I stay away from the two safeties, and I stay away from Le'Veon Bell because in my opinion, it's a waste of money. I don't like the character there.
I'd probably look at Matthew just because I think he's a guy who's turned his life around, and I think they need a veteran back there because Grimes obviously is not going to be there. I think they need a veteran. Yeah, I wouldn't touch Le'Veon Bell with a 30-foot pole. And Landon Collins, I think he's kind of off and on. He's been up and down. What if I threw Jay Ajayi from the Eagles out there?
I would consider that, not at a big ticket though, because he's been with a couple of teams. He's having trouble staying healthy. And boy, I'll tell you something else. Everywhere he goes, there's always a little bit of an issue. He's a bit of a freelancer. Doesn't necessarily do things the way the team wants him to all the time. So be careful with that one. All right.
Our last one, and I definitely, Roy, you made the right move. We got to have Justin go before you moving forward there. You may go off the board on this one too. You went off the board saying I don't want any of them. I guess you're right. If I would have thrown maybe a good offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, that would have been better. But I didn't. And Dominican Sue's a free agent. I don't want to touch that guy either.
Nah, too much money, too old.
Yeah, and
get young.
Too much of a pain in the ass too, for the most part.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you. I looked at concerts coming up in 2019. See, we have free agents, we have concerts, and frankly, this is a tough decision for me. I would go see all three of these in a heartbeat, and I think I will. Two of them are touring together, but I'm throwing out three of them. You got to go see one of them, okay?
Okay.
You got to go see one of them. Justin, you first. My man Bob Seger is going to be in the Tampa Bay area. Hootie and the Blowfish are back, baby. They're touring again. Man. And you got Bare Naked Ladies.
I'm going to take a gun and shoot myself. I don't like any of those.
No! No! No!
Just offered him Le'Veon Bell, Landon Collins, and Matthew, man.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
No, I mean, look, I don't know. Hootie and the Blowfish.
Bob Seger. Oh, my gosh.
I think Bob Seger was before my time. Hootie, I never liked. Although Darius Rucker apparently is a really great person. Yeah. I could care less about Bare Naked Ladies. If you made me go to one of those three, I would do everything in my power to escape and run away, whatever it took.
God.
That sounds like torture to me, going to those concerts.
Oh, you got to go one, though. You can't pick one. You have to.
Okay, I'll go with Hootie.
3 tickets. You can walk across the street and go see one of them.
Of the three, I would take Hootie and the Blowfish.
Okay. Roy, you walking too?
Not a chance, man. I'm going to see Bob Seger. I'm going to see Bob Seger.
Bob Seger or Michael McDonald?
No, Bob Seger. I'll go see Bob Seger. Look, I because you brought him up, back at the beginning of the season, I taught myself how to play Main Street and Against the Wind. Two of my favorite songs, his two best songs. Now, look, I'm covering my ears when old-fashioned rock and roll comes on. All right? I don't want to hear that crap.
That's not his fault. That's Risky Business's fault.
At the end of the day, all right, that piano riff at the start just, to me, it's just bad. But anyway, I'll go see Bob Seger. And you know what? I'll actually enjoy it, I think.
You know what? I think Still the Same is one of Bob Seger's best songs.
You know what? I've got 3 Bob Seger songs on my iPad right now, okay? And those are the 3. Against the Wind, Main Street, and...
All right. All right, you know what? Both of you, and I know, Justin, you're going to have to kind of pick on yourself here. You know what I think about both of your comments right now? Let's go back to the first clip at the beginning of the show. This is what I think about your music choices. Right now.
It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I tell you, it just doesn't matter.
I want Dirk Koetter to get on a stool and scream like that. You know what, Dirk? You got 3 weeks left, buddy. Who cares? Do whatever the hell you want. You're going to get paid anyway, right?
I'll tell you what, he should get on a stool and ask, you got 3 weeks left. Who cares? Show me you care. You got 3 weeks left. Show me you care.
Yeah. You know what, though? We'll get into this later on Thursday when we resume our podcast. I'll be real interested to see how this team plays for him moving forward now.
That is one of the interesting things to watch in the final 3 games for sure.
All right, just so you guys know, Bare Naked Ladies is all over my iPod. Judge me if you want.
I certainly am judging you now.
Big Bob Seger is huge on my iPod, and Hootie and the Blowfish would be last on that list. But the fact that Bare Naked Ladies are opening for Hootie and the Blowfish, I may ruin my reputation with both of you. Go see Bare Naked Ladies and just walk out and not see Hootie afterwards.
Oh, man.
Wow. And it's a reunion tour for Hootie and the Blowfish. It used to just be Hootie. Now he's got the Blowfish back.
Yeah. So, man, hey, people really they rip Hootie and the Blowfish like, I'm trying to think of a parallel here. Like, you wonder why some people rip on something in society because it becomes kind of trendy to hate it when it's really not that bad. I think Hootie and the Blowfish fall in that category. Like, I'm going to hate this because you know what? Nickelback's like that.
I was just thinking that.
Everybody hates Nickelback. You know why? Because it's cool to hate Nickelback.
No, because they suck. That's why they hate Nickelback.
Oh, my God. You know what? I'm going to wrap it up right now. I am out of here. This is another rendition of A Few Extra Bucs. Remember, though, we're expanding our website. We have polls, so log on, subscribe to pewterpirates.com. It's free. Check out our latest poll. If you are the Bucs general manager or run or own this team, what's the biggest change you would make? Vote in our poll. We'd love to get our results Thursday in our podcast. But that's it. For Justin Thomas, our producer, for Roy Cummings, our Buccaneer insider, for our title sponsors, House of Brews and Sea Dog Brewing Company, great food, great brews, great service. I am merely Mike Nabors. We'll have much more on Thursday. But, yeah, go to pewterpirates.com, vote in our poll. If you were in charge of the Bucs, how would you turn things around? We'll have our results Thursday in our A Few Extra Bucs podcast. Thanks for logging on.